spent all this time getting this great angle worked out for Mitzi in this shot, and then she got up. Anyway, so I've had a lot of people writing into me talking about a guy named Cyrax, saying that he's possibly the next Chris Chan. Well, Cyrax absolutely is not the next Chris Chan, and we'll talk a little bit about why. But before I get into that, I want to do my call to action first so I don't forget. If you're just joining us, just coming to the discussion, I recently put out a concept album called Nowhere Land, which was based on Chris Chan, his life and his existence and all of that. And so if you are a Christorian of any degree, someone who's fascinated by Chris Chan, I highly recommend you checking it out. Put a lot of time and effort into it, and I look forward to hearing what you think. Anyway, so talking about Cyrax, not going out there and fishing for these people or searching for these people myself, I had to watch a few videos on him, and what I saw was not something that bears the sociological gravitas of Chris Chan. The reason Chris Chan caught on was because he caught on at a very specific transitional phase in cultural understanding about autism and Asperger's syndrome and neurodivergence and that sort of thing. It was right when people did not, on the whole, understand autism or neurodivergence and what all was going on there in common parlance and common discussion like they do now. But there was a burgeoning awareness of the terminology and the concepts and that sort of thing. And so you had a very unique transitional point where a person like that could get set up as the figurehead for all of the odd behavior and everything associated with something that people were culturally coming to an understanding of. Whereas with Cyrax, so I watched a number of videos on this guy, the various videos that came up. Smokey McGee had a few of them. What else? I've got my YouTube here. What did I go to my watch history? What did I see? I watched 4 Feet of Rage, the Cyrax story. I watched Cyrax, The Future of Music, Who is Cyrax by Smokey McGee, and I think that was it. I started to watch a couple more, but I got a good enough idea of what was going on there. So Cyrax does not come along at a very specific point in the cultural evolution of the timeline of an evolving cultural understanding like Chris Chan did. Cyrax is just a narcissistic redneck with severe small man's disease. I mean, that's all it is. And quite frankly, I lived in Mississippi at the height of the popularity of Kid Rock and Limp Bizkit. So seeing deranged hayseed mutants appropriating black hip-hop culture to their own bizarre ends is not something that really phases me at all, and is at all bizarre or unusual to me. And I obviously I harbor a great deal of aggravation with such people because I have, from living in Mississippi in a time of very low tolerance for any kind of diversity, I have a lot of personal scars and that sort of thing. So when I say mutant, I speak in anger because of that. Even with Cyrax, I shouldn't be doing that, and I acknowledge that. So try to do these videos as off the cuff as I can. But anyway, you get the idea. And, it's kind of funny because I've been trying to get caught up on a lot of classic cinema and classic novels that I haven't read or watched recently. And I recently watched Deliverance for the first time, which takes place in the North Georgia mountains, where I don't live in the North Georgia mountains, but I live in Georgia. And I've been in the North Georgia mountains in the very location, not the exact locations, but the very regions where Deliverance occurred. And, that is that kind of thing is not, that's not an inaccurate portrayal of how those people behave. Not to cast aspersions, but it's just the reality of the situation. The same thing in Mississippi and all throughout the South. And you just, it's again, I don't mean to sound classist or condescending or insulting to anybody or anything like that, but it's just a reality that you got all of these brainless white trash losers with nothing better to do with their time, and nothing better that they're capable of doing with their time than sitting around and fucking each other and making absolutely no wise decisions about the implications of what they're doing, and lacking the cognitive capacity to do so. And eventually you get some grotesque little loser like Cyrax. And the thing is, this is not, again, this is the American white trash phenomenon. Like I keep saying, Cyrax seems like something out of Deliverance. He seems like something out of Pink Flamingos. He seems like something out of Gummo. He seems like something out of one of these movies that like that. And I think the thing is that the morbid fascination with Cyrax, ultimately on a cultural level, has less to do with him specifically, and more to do with kind of this fascination we all have with stripping back the veneer of respectability in society and looking at what's underneath it, the scummy underbelly of the world. And it's a very, I think it's kind of almost like if we think about it in a Jungian sense, and yes, this is the first and perhaps only time the philosophy and teachings of Carl Jung have been invoked in discussing Cyrax. But anyway, if you think about it on a Jungian level, there is kind of a collective unconscious at work, where in terms of our understanding of our reality as a nation, as a country, as a culture, and that sort of thing, where we have all of these the country, the United States, for all of its faults, has a lot of great credits on its resume in terms of we've made tremendous strides forward in the areas of human rights, in the areas of economics, in the areas of scientific and medical innovation, and all these things. And all of these great forward motions that we make, and other areas in the realm of computing technology and the entertainment industry, and so many amazing things. And all of these innovations are they are the product of the intelligent and the people who are seeking to raise the bar and seeking to aim high in their existence and that sort of thing. And those things should be championed, and we want to kind of look to those things. We have this natural impulse to look to those things to structure our national identity around that, because we want to have there's I think a natural impulse to think, well, we are safest and most provided for and most prosperous when there is this agreement on the nature of our national identity. And identifying that with the most high, the highest levels of success and that sort of thing. And because of that, the dregs of our society and the bottom level of our society kind of becomes the most, this psychological backwater for all of us. It's something we don't want to think about, we don't want to acknowledge. It's kind of like if you have a beautiful rock feature in your garden, but you pull those rocks back and there's all kinds of worms and ants and spiders and creepy crawlies and gross stuff. That's essentially the morbid fascination that a person like Cyrax occupies, and it's something that people like that have always occupied. There has always been this morbid fascination with the with poor white trash and poor white trash culture, because it's where, I think probably because it appeals to the part of us that knows we have this transgressive element in our nature, and so we don't want to acknowledge the transgressive element in our nature. We don't want to acknowledge that, people don't want to acknowledge that they've had, say, incestuous fantasies, or fantasies of committing crimes, or giving in to other socially unacceptable behaviors and things like that. So what happens in the sense of a Jungian shadow concept, we file all of that away. And when it comes to how we think about our cultural identity, we file all that away into the realm of the white trash and the white trash and the rednecks and the gutter people and all of that. And I'm not specifically singling out white people and white culture with that. Every culture has its concept of sleazy, trashy underbelly behavior. It's just, Cyrax and his ilk are what we're looking at here. And so we have this kind of morbid fascination with peeling back the Band-Aid and looking at the wound, moving the rock aside and looking at all the gross, creepy crawlies underneath it. We have a cultural fascination with that, and it's something that we've always done at a safe distance. Think about, if Cyrax came along 20 or 30 years ago, he would have been on Jerry Springer. He would have been on Maury Povich. He would have been on a daytime talk show, and he would have been getting trotted out for the freak show circuit that was circulated among those among all of the daytime TV watchers and everything. And that there is a classist element to that. It's the middle and upper class, daring to look in their morbid fascination at just how bad it can get, and that's how those programs are marketed and that sort of thing. So he would have been on something like that, and he would have been getting trotted out on programs like that. And the reason I bring all of that up is that Cyrax does not occupy anything unique or unusual in our society. We've always had this morbid fascination with, how the other half lives, with looking at the dregs of society with morbid curiosity and morbid fascination. We do that, and again, white trash, white culture is not unique in that regard. We have, I would argue, for example, you could say that you could say that things like blaxploitation cinema and that sort of thing are an outgrowth of that as well, although I would argue that within that, blaxploitation cinema is an art form unto itself, so you have artistic conventions within that, not just not just pointing the camera at the most disturbing thing possible. But my point being that we have ways of contextualizing and morbidly staring into the lens of poverty and human misery that's abundant in the black culture as well. And one of the great as I say that, one of the great, I think, depictions of that experience in cinema is in the original Candyman movie. I haven't seen the remake that they made, but is in the original Candyman movie, where you have the woman who's the white, the white social worker from an ostensibly upper class background and everything, that is walking by herself into this dilapidated apartment building looking for this one person, and we get that there it's just beautiful in the way it's shot in capturing the fact that she's sinking further and further into this world that's wholly alien to her. So that, and I bring that up to say that's another example of how these things are explored. One of my favorite movies of all time, Blue Velvet, is built around this very concept of taking the picturesque Norman Rockwell American society that we hold in such high esteem and looking at the horror that's going on underneath it. So Cyrax occupies our collective morbid fascination with things like that. Uh, he's very, and because of that, because he occupies a pre-existing category of morbid fascination, he's not going to be the next Chris Chan. He's not going to have the kind of cultural gravitas inherent to Chris Chan, where Chris Chan became the beacon of something that people were the poster boy, if you will, the bellwether of something that people were trying to understand in the realm of not just popular culture in general, but more specifically internet culture and how that person related to internet culture. So my real thing, I know that there's always the accusation of, in any time I do something like this where there's a more even-handed and somewhat genteel analysis, people will say, oh, you're white knighting for Cyrax. Absolutely not. Everything I have seen about Cyrax indicates that he is a highly, highly contemptible person, and I see absolutely no reason to dispute any of that. I want to be I want to be sympathetic to him because he is such a such a visually repulsive person, and that's no fault of his own. He got very bad genetics. He really scored badly in the genetic lottery, and that's no fault of his. But at the end of the day, it's like the moral of the story of Phantom of the Opera, which is that no matter how horribly people react to you and things that you can't help, that will never give you the moral high ground in becoming an evil, villainous person. And it's the same thing with him. The sad thing is he's clearly not bright enough to grasp a concept like that. So I would say to the people, people are, I know, digging through the internet trying to find different people. I'll tell you this. I've encountered people on the internet, people who produce content, people who are producing content with no influence from me or no help from me or anything, but they're producing their own content and blasting it out there, that people that are generally are the public at large just hasn't gotten a hold of them yet. I'm not going to do anything to bring your attention to those people because I don't believe that that's a good thing to do. I don't think it's good to give those people the attention that they're craving, and I don't think that it's good to encourage this sick and morbid fascination that we all seem to have with using the internet to dig up bizarre and disturbing people. So to the people that are fascinated with Cyrax and posting about him, and especially the people that are trolling him and all of that, my question would be, what is your end game in all of that? I mean, what are you hoping to gain with that? Because the long-term effect of Chris Chan and the public fascination with Chris Chan was you have a completely mentally deranged man-child who sexually assaulted his aging mother and is now rotting in prison awaiting some determination on that matter. And it's kind of like that occurred because of nearly 2 decades of sustained harassment and influence on this one person. So if you're someone out there that's making Cyrax related content, I would just strongly encourage you to ask yourself, what's your end game in all of this? Because the more that Cyrax does not exist in a vacuum. The more that you fuck with this person, the more that you screw with his head and everything, the more you are influencing him down a very dark path and a dark road. And that's what I wish people would think about. Chris is a fairly dark example of this. Oh, Mitzi got back in my lap, so there she is. Hi, Mitzi. Chris is a very dark example of this, but there's people that have been completely forgotten about. think about a YouTuber like Tony48219 who ultimately murdered a woman and then killed himself, murder suicide thing. Think about someone like Rudy Ferretti who did the same thing. These are people who have probably been long forgotten by YouTube users and cringe consumers, if we want to call them that, in general. But they're very dark and disturbing stories, and no, nothing that you're doing is directly contributing to that. But I would just strongly advise you to think about the long game of the world you're living in, the world you want to inhabit, and that sort of thing. And maybe, if Cyrax, it sounds like from what I've read that Cyrax is a very devious and potentially criminal person, and criminal behavior, that kind of criminal behavior needs to be stopped. Obviously, he needs to face legal repercussions for his actions, but above and beyond that, I really just don't think that continuing to document someone like this is anything good. What you're going to do by, this is obviously, like I said, this is a person with severe small man's disease, and what you're going to do is encourage him to dig in his heels and become more and more arrogant and more vicious in his behavior, because obviously I think at the root of what motivates people to identify someone as a lolcow is when they've identified someone who has a massive ego, a ridiculously massive ego, who's incapable of realizing how haughty and over the top they're being in their arrogance and their attitude. That's and that's what I think motivates people, because that's what they can take advantage of to goad the person into more and more extreme behavior. And the sad thing is, someone like Cyrax does not have the mental capacity to introspect that way, or if he did, he would have to do it with extraordinary help from mental health professionals. So there's not going to be a point at which Cyrax realizes that he's ultimately the cause of his problems in all of this. And knowing that, I just don't think it's a good idea to continue pursuing down this road. My strong advice to you would be stop trying to, stop looking for the next Christian, first of all. And for God's sake, stop chronicling Cyrax, stop getting into him, stop making him, he's not, like I said, he's not going to occupy the same cultural gravitas as Christian. He's just going to be the next loser weirdo of the week. That's it. So anyway, those are my thoughts on Cyrax. I hope that was helpful, and like I said, I look forward to your thoughts. Take care.